Hey everyone, welcome back to my podcast, Anatomy and Physiology Bit by Bit. This is your host, Dr. Steve Sullivan, coming to you from just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I've been teaching A&P since 2002. Today we're finishing up the digestive system with the large intestine, digestive motility, and blood supply. It's been a long road, but we finally made it through the digestive system. We're getting pretty close to the end of the last chapter of A&P. Some of you have been on this ride since episode 1, but whether you're new to the show or have been listening for years, please take a minute to rate and review the podcast on whatever app you're using. It helps get the word out, and I'd really appreciate your help reaching as many students as possible. So if you're enjoying this show and if it's helping you in any way, please just take a minute. Go on your app, rate it, review it, leave a comment. I would really appreciate that. So speaking of comments, from the comments and the emails that I get, I know a lot of you are A&P students and this show is helping, which makes me so happy. But I also know that this course is hard and the exams are tough. Well, today I have something you really want to listen to. There's a smartphone app called SHARPEN, and it uses good learning science techniques to help students prepare for exams in any college course, but especially life sciences like anatomy and physiology and microbiology. SHARPEN is produced by McGraw-Hill Education, and recently I spoke with the two people who are leading the development of SHARPEN. Now, this app isn't free, but it is relatively inexpensive, and my guests have offered a promo code so you all can get a deep discount. I'm going to give you that promo code at the end of the interview. Full disclosure, I am an author for McGraw-Hill Education, but I do not have a stake in SHARPEN, and they're not paying me to be on the show today. I just think it's a good tool for students, and I wanted you to hear about it. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Kat Demsing and Maria Salvat of McGraw-Hill Education's new study app, SHARPEN. Okay, welcome to the show, Kat Demsing and Maria Salvat of McGraw-Hill Education, and more specifically, the SHARPEN app. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you do?
Sure, Steve, and shout out to all your listeners. It's great to be on. We're excited to be here and share a little bit more about SHARPEN. As you mentioned, my name is Kat. I'm the head of SHARPEN, which is our very cool, very innovative new college study app. We are a all-in-one platform that is helping learners identify their knowledge gaps and actually fix those knowledge gaps, so that they can show up smarter, they can show up more confident to classes and to their exams, and feel better prepared for what's next.
Thanks, Kat. Hi, Steve. I'm Maria Salvat. I am the head of content for SHARPEN. So my team builds all of the study resources that you can find in SHARPEN. And I know today we're going to talk a lot about A&P, but SHARPEN offers resources for many different course areas. I think we're at over 140 at this point. And in addition to taking A&P, if you're taking biology, microbiology, we also offer SHARPEN courses there. So really, we try to address all of the courses that you might have a little bit of trouble in or might need a little extra help in.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because many students who are taking anatomy and physiology are going to be taking or are already taking microbiology as well, especially nursing students. So what are some of the obstacles to learning that McGraw-Hill has identified when it comes to life science courses like A&P?
It's a great question, Steve. And what we'll say is McGraw-Hill built SHARPEN really as a response to having spoken to so many students and just interviewed them. I mean, we personally interviewed over 100 students. We surveyed thousands more, and a lot of these common themes kept emerging. So one is that students felt like they were struggling to time manage, like they were transitioning from being high school students coming into college in a post-COVID learning environment where many of their courses are now taught online. So it's harder to feel engaged in the classroom experience. It's harder to feel connected to your peers. So those kind of organic study buddy or like study group moments weren't as common anymore in today's day and age. And they just felt very overwhelmed. Frankly, there's a ton of content out there, and specifically with anatomy and physiology, where you're having to learn and memorize so many terms, so many systems really quickly, in a one semester course, it can be tough. And our students were feeling overwhelmed. And so Sharpen was really McGraw-Hill's response to meeting learners where they're at. Sharpen's goal is to just eliminate friction, deliver real-time feedback on exactly where that student is struggling so that it's making high quality learning just feel light, feel intuitive, and empowering.
You touched on it a little bit, Kat, but in A&P, there is just so much information, and a lot of it is being presented in a way that maybe you haven't encountered before as a student. So you're thinking about the human body differently than you might have in another course. And you're having to learn an entirely new vocabulary around the body as well, in addition to learning about specific concepts, processes. It can be a lot. And if you don't have a plan or you don't really know how to approach studying for a course like this, it can feel overwhelming. And so the Sharpen resources are really there to help you learn and reinforce those core concepts in your A&P class so that you can be better prepared for class and better prepared for your exams.
Oh, wow, you really hit the nail on the head right there. The number one concern A&P students have is performing better on exams. There's such an enormous volume of content covered in anatomy and physiology, and having an app like this that can help organize that content in a way that students can use when they're on the bus or making dinner, on breaks at work, or when their kids are at a soccer practice, it's so helpful. It's a time management issue, and many of my students are burning the candle at both ends so they can get into a career and make a better life for themselves and their family.
One of my favorite quotes from a student that we had interviewed when we first introduced Sharpen to them was, wow, this looks like TikTok and my textbook had a baby. And this is Sharpen. The goal was to make Sharpen feel bite-sized and just be engaging. So we have short form videos on the most important topics for, as Maria mentioned, tons and tons of courses, particularly helpful for anatomy and physiology. We have flashcards. We have guided practice problems. So there's always a resource, regardless of what type of learner a student identifies with, whether they say, many of them say, hey, I'm a visual learner. Well, guess what? We have great resources for you in the Sharpen app in a really structured way that makes studying feel like you're actually making progress, not that you're just inundated in course content.
One of my favorite features of Sharpen is our quiz bank. We offer 3 different levels of quizzing, essentially. So you can take kind of basic multiple choice questions and get instant feedback on how you do on those questions. You can also take more advanced question types if you want to work on fill in the blank, especially if you have to spell all of those body parts correctly on your exam. You can practice that in Sharpen. We also have a test mode to our quiz bank. So if you're really trying to mimic the experience of an exam, there's a countdown clock at the top. You're timed, and then all your feedback is provided to you at the very end. And then, of course, everything in our quiz bank feeds into our improve feature, which is powered by AI and really points out, looks like you're doing great on these concepts, but you could also use a little bit more practice here. Let's provide some more resources and context for you on those topics. And so it's just such a powerful tool to not only learn the material, but make sure you're ready to go for your exam and feel confident going into your next class session.
That's the personalized power of Sharpen. It's not just a library of a bunch of different study activities. The more a student interacts with Sharpen, the smarter Sharpen gets about what that student does and doesn't know, so that it starts feeding them exactly the study activities that they need to improve their mastery on any given topic.
That sounds amazing. So in my classes, I've been using Connect for many, many years, which is McGraw-Hill's course management system. It has learning resources, an ebook, tutor videos I've created, lab simulations, etc. It's a great tool, and other publishers have similar systems that exist with their textbooks. However, these are instructor-initiated tools. The instructor has to adopt the product, set it up, and assign it to their students. But from what you're saying, it looks like Sharpen is available directly to students and doesn't need a professor to set it up.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Steve. We wanted to make Sharpen meet students exactly where they're at. So any student, any person on this earth can go to the iOS App Store, or if they have an Android phone, they can go to the Google Play Store, or they can go directly to our website at studysharpen.com and gain access to all of these awesome resources and our AI-powered Improve engine. That was a big goal of ours. Yes, we have millions of students taking McGraw-Hill courses every day, but we wanted to build a solution for students that is consumer grade, that is engaging, and consistent with all of the other apps that they're interacting with day in and day out, regardless of whether they're sitting in a McGraw-Hill course or not.
It sounds like it's really easy to find. I will put links in the show notes to all the different ways people can find Sharpen and get it working for them. Now, I'm all about the science. So as you can imagine, I like data. What kind of data do you have to suggest that Sharpen is actually helping students do better in their courses?
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve. We are constantly listening to our students. They give us great product feedback. So for any listeners out there, as you're interacting with Sharpen, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We're able to adapt and add to the product pretty seamlessly. And when it comes to like making sure that what we have built is actually leading to better exam outcomes, because that's ultimately our goal. We want to help our students succeed wherever they are. We have two kind of key data points. So the first is we run in-app surveys constantly because we want to hear from students, is Sharpen really helping you? And consistently, what we found is that over 70% of our students report feeling more confident and more prepared walking into class and exams after having used Sharpen. And then 63% of all of our students also report actually getting better exam scores due to Sharpen's help.
Well, it sounds like you've got the results right there. I mean, it seems like it's at least worth a try, especially if there's a free trial or something like that.
And Kat mentioned that we're constantly doing surveys and taking feedback. We have a new feature coming to A&P courses in Sharpen specifically this fall. These are going to be diagram-based flashcards. So if I need to know all the bones of the skull for my next exam, I can review that, the illustration diagram with the indicators and explanations in flashcard format, and I can look at those wherever I am, whenever I can fit in my study time. And that feature was direct feedback from our A&P students, that they were looking for that type of on-the-go solution. And so we're always listening, we're always working on ways that we can improve Sharpen in general, and of course Sharpen for our A&P users.
Okay, now you're talking. Half of anatomy and physiology is anatomy, and I hate to see students losing points on their exams because they're missing the straight-up labeling questions. It's a lot to memorize, but it's essential and it's not complicated. So having something like anatomy flashcards that they can use to test their ability to recall their knowledge can help them build a cushion on their exams. So when they get to the more difficult physiology questions, they've got more wiggle room to make some mistakes. So now that students know how to find the Sharpen app, how much is it going to cost? Students are already spending so much money on tuition, books, living expenses, etc. Is Sharpen affordable?
It's a good question. So on average, our students pay about $10 a month for a subscription to Sharpen Plus. Sharpen Plus for them unlocks the full content library. So whether they're taking anatomy and physiology and then next semester they take microbiology, or maybe they have to take organic chemistry, which we know is really, really hard. Sharpen Plus unlocks the entire library of resources and study activities in Sharpen's library, and then also unlocks all of the premium features so that they can take thousands of practice exams, search through tons and tons of flashcards and short bite-sized videos. We unlock all of that for you. We have a couple of different subscriptions. We have a monthly subscription. We have a 3-month subscription. Our students really love that because that typically aligns very well to the semester. And so that's a 3-month subscription for $29.99. So it's about, again, like I said, $10 a month. Or you can kind of lock in a really favorable price by subscribing for the full year at $89.99, which somebody do the math for me. I think it's about $7 or $8 a month.
Oh, I like that. And just to clarify, because I have listeners from all around the world, these prices are in US dollars. So if a student is taking A&P and micro at the same time, that $10 a month gets them access to all of it?
Yeah, exactly. It's an all-you-can-eat subscription, so to speak. We let all of our students, before they sign up, they can take a 7-day free trial of Sharpen Plus, but we would love to provide an even better opportunity for your listeners. And so we have kind of an exclusive promo code that are available for all of your listeners. And we'd love for them to take advantage of that by going to studysharpen.com, signing up for a free account, which it takes about 30 seconds to set up an account. And then you can subscribe to Sharpen Plus directly on our web app. Again, at studysharpen.com, and input the promo code in all caps, all one word, study perks. That's capital STUDYPERKS, study perks. And that will provide $20 off of a subscription. So that means that's your entire first month free for a 1-month subscription.
That is a very generous offer. I will put that promo code in the show notes as well. I mean, with basically a free month, you've got to at least try it.
Absolutely.
So, Kat and Maria, is there anything else you'd like to share about the Sharpen app?
I think we're really excited to have all of your listeners log in, sign up, and then just give us feedback. We are every single month, Maria is thinking about ways to make the Sharpen Study app more robust, more helpful to students. If you guys have a great idea on a feature that we ought to include, please don't hesitate to reach out. We literally listen and read every single piece of feedback that we get from our students. The most important things to us is making sure that you guys are successful. We're coming out with a really exciting feature this July. It's going to be called Ask Sharpen. And so this is supercharging Sharpen with Gen AI functionality. So even if we don't have all of the content coverage that you expect, whether that's in A&P or beyond for another course that you're taking that is equally as hard, you'll be able to use the power of Gen AI to create your own custom study sets. So be on the lookout for that.
I think we really do just want everyone to succeed with Sharpen. That really is what motivates us every day. And we hear from students who not only love the app, but how much of a difference it made in their course. And that's really what keeps us going, is making the best materials so that students can succeed.
Well, thank you very much, Kat and Maria of McGraw-Hill's Sharpen. I appreciate you coming on and telling people about this amazing tool and for the generous promo code that's going to get them such a good deal on it. Good luck keeping Sharpen sharp and helping students get their B or better in A&P.
Thanks so much, Steve. We really appreciate the invite.
Thanks,
and
Steve.
We look forward to being on in a future session announcing other cool features and services in Sharpen.
Well, I'll be here when you do. Thanks again for coming on.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Once again, thank you, Kat and Maria, for letting us all know about Sharpen. You can find Sharpen on the App Store for iOS phones from Apple and on Google Play for non-Apple phones. You can also go right to their website, studysharpen.com. There you can put in the promo code STUDYPERKS, all capitals, STUDYPERKS, and get your exclusive discount as one of my listeners. Now, in order to use the promo code, you have to register on the website. You can't do it through the app. But then once you log in on the app, you will have the access that the promo code gives you, including the discount. I will put all of this information on the show notes. It sounds like Sharpen may be a really good solution for a lot of you out there, so I would at least check out the free trial. Having said that, let's finish the digestive system.
You buy a pair of socks, that's 2 socks. You buy a pair of Bombas socks, that's 4 socks. Because one purchased is one donated. Socks are the #1 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. So when you buy a pair of super comfortable Bombas socks, you're also donating a pair. Bombas customers have powered over 150 million donations. So Bombas would like to thank you 150 million times. But we only have like 30 seconds. Go to bombas.com and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO at checkout.
The large intestine represents the final segment of the gastrointestinal tract, extending from the ileocecal sphincter or valve to the anus, and it's responsible for absorbing water, consolidating waste, and hosting essential microbial flora. It's shorter than the small intestine, measuring around 1.5 meters in length, but it has a considerably larger diameter, and that's why it's called the large intestine. Let's review what I covered in episode 59 in more detail, the gross anatomy of the large intestine. Anatomically, the large intestine is subdivided into distinct regions. It begins with the cecum, a pouch-like structure situated in the right lower quadrant of the abdomen. This region receives chyme from the small intestine's ileum through a circular band of smooth muscle called the ileocecal sphincter, which regulates one-way flow and prevents reflux, which would be movement of substances from the cecum into the ileum. We don't want that. That's backward. Attached to the cecum is the vermiform appendix, a narrow blind-ended pouch rich in lymphoid tissue. We used to think this was a vestigial organ, meaning that it doesn't really have any function. We just still have it because evolution hasn't gotten rid of it yet. But the appendix is now recognized as having potential roles in immune surveillance and the maintenance of gut flora, which is our microbiome. Following the cecum is the colon, which is divided into 4 sections. The ascending colon, named such because the contents are going up, rising superiorly from the cecum up toward the liver. So it ascends on the right side of the abdomen to the right colic flexure, which is near the liver. Sometimes you'll hear people call that the hepatic flexure. So it makes this medial turn, like a right angle turn, and becomes the transverse colon, which traverses the abdomen from right to left, suspended by the transverse mesocolon. The transverse colon is named such because it's in the transverse plane of our bodies. It then takes a 90-degree inferior turn, which we call the left colic flexure, also known as the splenic flexure, because the spleen is over there. And it becomes the descending colon. So now the contents are descending. They're going inferiorly. So the descending colon courses down the left side of your abdomen. It makes another medial turn into this S-shaped segment, which we call the sigmoid colon. That sigmoid colon leads to the rectum. The rectum is right in the midline. It is a straight muscular tube approximately 12 to 15 centimeters in length. It stores feces until defecation, which is the process of expelling digestive waste from the body. Remember, rectus means straight, so the rectum is a straight muscular tube. Its internal folds, which we call rectal valves, help retain the semi-solid digestive waste product that we call feces. While holding the feces, it allows the passage of the gas that's produced in our gut, which we call flatus. The anal canal is the final segment of the gastrointestinal tract, measuring 2 to 3 centimeters. It is encircled by 2 muscular sphincters, the internal anal sphincter, which is composed of involuntary smooth muscle, and the external anal sphincter, which is under voluntary control and is composed of skeletal muscle. Feces are ultimately expelled through the anus. The colon's external surface is characterized by several distinct features. One of them is the tenii coli. These are longitudinal bands of the colon's muscularis externa that run along most of the length of the colon. They have these tonic contractions that cause the formation of a puckered sac appearance in the colon, and we call each of those puckered sacs a haustrum. The plural would be haustra. And they help compartmentalize and mix the contents in the colon. Scattered along the surface are epiploic or omental appendices. These are small peritoneal pouches filled with fat, and we're not really sure what they do. Histologically, the wall of the large intestine is adapted for its primary functions: water absorption and fecal formation. The mucosa is lined with simple columnar epithelium interspersed with numerous goblet cells, which secrete mucus to lubricate fecal matter and protect the epithelium. Absorptive colonocytes facilitate the uptake of water and electrolytes. Unlike the small intestine, the large intestine lacks villi, but possess deep crypts of Lieberkühn, which contain stem cells, absorptive cells, goblet cells, and enteroendocrine cells. We also call those intestinal crypts. The submucosa contains connective tissue, blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves. The muscularis externa is composed of an inner circular muscle layer and an outer longitudinal muscle layer condensed into those tenae coli. The outermost layer is either serosa or adventitia, depending on whether the colon is intraperitoneal or retroperitoneal. The cecum, transverse colon, and sigmoid colon are intraperitoneal, meaning they are found within the peritoneal cavity of the abdominopelvic cavity. The ascending colon, descending colon, and rectum are retroperitoneal, meaning they're posterior to the peritoneum. Innervation of the large intestine is complex and regionally specialized. Parasympathetic fibers arise from the vagus nerve up to the splenic flexure and from the pelvic splanchnic nerves, S2 to S4, beyond that point. Sympathetic innervation is provided via the superior and inferior mesenteric plexuses. They modulate blood flow and motility. Somatic innervation of the external anal sphincter arises from the pudendal nerve, granting conscious control over defecation. Physiologically, the large intestine performs several critical functions. One of its main roles is the absorption of water and electrolytes, particularly sodium and chloride, reclaiming much of the 1.5 liters of chyme delivered to it daily. It also absorbs vitamins synthesized by resident microbes. I'll bet you've heard of the microbiome or microbiota, which essentially refers to the microorganisms that live in a specific environment. In this case, we will discuss the gut microbiome. The trillions of microbes in the gut are found from the stomach to the anus, and we can't live without them. At between 35 and 40 trillion, there are about the same number of microbes in your body as there are human cells. For a while, we actually thought there were 10 times as many microbes as human cells. But more recent estimates have it closer to 1 to 1, since we have somewhere between 28 and 37 trillion human cells in us, with variations for age and sex. And it's not just bacteria in the microbiome. We have viruses, fungi, and archaea. We have a mutually beneficial relationship with these microbes. They get somewhere to live, and in return, we get a lot of benefits. For example, they can digest some of the things in our food that we don't have the enzymes for, like the cellulose and pectin of a plant's cell wall, and other polysaccharides in plants. The microbes ferment these indigestible carbohydrates, producing short-chain fatty acids that can be absorbed and utilized by colonocytes. Remember, the colonocytes are the epithelial cells of the colon. The microbes in our gut synthesize vitamin K and biotin, which is vitamin B7. Vitamin K is essential for blood clotting, and we don't get enough of it from our dietary sources. Babies are born with very low levels of vitamin K, and it doesn't transfer easily from the pregnant woman to the fetus during pregnancy. This means that babies are at risk of a serious bleeding disorder called vitamin K deficiency bleeding, which can be life-threatening. Therefore, babies are born and then they're given a vitamin K shot, at least in the United States. I don't know about other countries. The vitamin K shot helps prevent the vitamin K deficiency bleeding because vitamin K is essential for blood clotting, like I mentioned before. It's needed to make the proteins that help blood clots and stop bleeding. If you go back to episode 40, you'll hear me talk about the specifics of blood clotting and all the clotting factors, which are the proteins we're talking about. Babies are born with low levels of vitamin K because they don't have enough bacteria in their gut to produce it on their own, as you can imagine. And the breast milk is not enough. While breast milk is the best nutrition for babies, obviously, it contains very little vitamin K. That vitamin K shot is recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics in the United States for all newborns as the best way to prevent this disorder. This shot ensures that babies have enough vitamin K to prevent dangerous bleeding, including bleeding in the brain. The reason all babies get it, even though not all babies might need it, is because we don't know right away, and it's safe. And it really is essential for the babies who are at risk of this. Biotin is necessary for formation of fatty acids and glucose, which are used as fuels by the body. It is also important for the metabolism of amino acids and carbohydrates. Each are then absorbed by the colonocytes. And one last thing, microbes also inhibit pathogenic colonization through competition and immune modulation. So the good microbes help prevent the bad microbes from making us sick. The bacteria of the gut digest the carbohydrates via fermentation, producing hydrogen, methane, and carbon dioxide, which mixes with the air we actually end up swallowing. Bacteria add hydrogen sulfide and 2 amines to the mixture, which give it an odor. The intestinal gas is eventually expelled from the anus and called flatus. Typically, we expel about half a liter per day. You'll notice that if your diet is high in plant-based food with a lot of fiber, intestinal gas increases as well. Excessive intestinal gas can distend the walls of the intestine and cause discomfort. For example, people who are lactose intolerant and don't make the enzyme that breaks down lactose or milk sugar, the bacteria have to do it all for them, and then they end up with excessive gas and cramping. Another major function of the large intestine is the formation and storage of feces. As water is reabsorbed, the remaining material becomes increasingly solid, ultimately forming feces, a mixture of water, undigested food residue, bacteria, mucus, fat, small amounts of proteins, salts, and shed epithelial cells from the mucosa. It also has pigments like stercobilin, which gives normal feces its brown color. Before we get into expelling the feces, which requires a lot of gastric motility, I want to talk about motility in general, from the small intestine all the way to the defecation reflex, because we haven't really gone into it too much. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit to the small intestine and talk about the ways that contents are moved in the small intestine and what stimulates contents to be moving in the large intestine as well. We're going to call this digestive motility, and I will break it down from small intestine to large intestine. Motility in the small intestine plays a vital role in ensuring the proper digestion and absorption of nutrients. It is achieved through a complex interplay of muscular contractions, neural input, and hormonal signals, all working in coordination to mix intestinal contents and move them progressively along the digestive tract. Remember that the wall of the small intestine contains 2 layers of smooth muscle, an inner circular layer and an outer longitudinal layer. These layers generate the mechanical activity required for 2 principal types of movement: segmentation and peristalsis. Segmentation is the more common of the two and involves alternating contractions of the circular muscle that mix the contents of the lumen, breaking up the chyme, and repeatedly bringing it into contact with the absorptive mucosa. This action facilitates thorough enzymatic digestion and efficient nutrient absorption. Regulating the rhythm of segmentation is the activity of intestinal pacemaker cells within the muscularis externa. These cells generate slow waves of depolarization known as the basic electrical rhythm, and they determine the frequency of potential contractions. The rate of these waves varies depending on which section of the small intestine you're in. There's approximately 12 waves per minute in the duodenum, 10 in the jejunum, and 8 in the ileum. Since they're more frequent in the proximal regions, segmentation results in a slow distal movement of chyme. Eventually, most of the nutrients in chyme have been absorbed, and the volume declines, and that's when segmentation slows. This is when peristalsis begins. Peristalsis consists of wave-like contractions of the longitudinal muscle that progress chyme along the intestinal tract more quickly than segmentation does. This propulsive activity coordinates with the circular muscle, which contracts proximal to a bolus of chyme and relaxes distal to it, making sure that it can only move in one direction, which is proximal to distal. Each wave of contraction begins to die out as another wave follows a little further down from where the last one started. This creates a series of overlapping waves of contraction called the migrating motor complex. It's initiated by the hormone motilin, which is secreted by the duodenum. Now, segmentation is the dominant pattern of contraction. It's initiated by the presence of chyme and is enhanced by parasympathetic input via the vagus nerve. Hormones such as gastrin, cholecystokinin, and insulin further stimulate segmentation, whereas sympathetic stimulation and hormones like glucagon inhibit it. As I mentioned, segmentation facilitates a slow propulsion of chyme toward the colon, while it serves mostly to optimize digestion by churning the contents and maximizing its contact with the mucosal surface. Peristalsis, on the other hand, provides a larger propulsive function. It moves chyme gradually through the intestine at a rate of about 1 centimeter per minute, allowing ample time for digestion and absorption. This reflexive movement is triggered by luminal distension and chemical stimuli and is mediated through the myenteric plexus of nerves in the muscularis externa. Excitatory motor neurons release acetylcholine and substance P to stimulate contraction behind the bolus, while inhibitory neurons release nitric oxide and vasoactive intestinal peptide to relax the muscle ahead of it. Another important regulatory mechanism is the ileal brake, which slows intestinal transit in response to the presence of unabsorbed nutrients, particularly fats, in the ileum. This response is mediated by hormones such as peptide YY and glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1, which act to reduce gastric emptying and suppress motility in the more proximal small intestine, thereby prolonging the time available for nutrient absorption. You've probably heard of GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic and Wegovy. One way these facilitate weight loss is by slowing gastric emptying, suppressing appetite. Control of small intestine motility is multifaceted, with the enteric nervous system playing a central role. That myenteric plexus I mentioned, part of the enteric nervous system, is located between the longitudinal and circular muscle layers and coordinates both mixing and propulsive movements. Although capable of functioning autonomously, the enteric nervous system is modulated by the autonomic nervous system. Parasympathetic stimulation via the vagus nerve generally enhances motility, and sympathetic input through splanchnic nerves typically inhibit it.
You buy a pair of socks, that's 2 socks. You buy a pair of Bombas socks, that's 4 socks. Because one purchased is one donated. Socks are the #1 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. So when you buy a pair of super comfortable Bombas socks, you're also donating a pair. Bombas customers have powered over 150 million donations. So Bombas would like to thank you 150 million times. But we only have like 30 seconds. Go to bombas.com and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com and use code AUDIO at checkout.
Now, the large intestine has to move its contents along too, so it eventually makes it to the rectum. So let's talk about its motility. The most common method for motility in the large intestine is haustral contraction, sometimes called haustral churning, which occur every 30 minutes. The smooth muscle of each haustrum contracts to mix contents, facilitate absorption, and squeeze the content into the adjacent distal haustrum. Mass movements, also called mass peristalsis, are stronger, less frequent contractions that typically occur after meals in response to the gastrocolic and duodenocolic reflexes. These reflexes begin when the stomach and duodenum fill with food and chyme, stretching their walls. That stimulates a reflex that ultimately results in the smooth muscle contractions of mass peristalsis. These contractions propel fecal matter toward the rectum, and they happen about 3 to 4 times a day, based on our meal intake. Finally, we have to expel the feces through the process of defecation. Defecation is triggered by the distension of the rectal wall, initiating a defecation reflex. The defecation reflex is mediated by the spinal cord, specifically segments S2 through S4. The internal anal sphincter relaxes involuntarily, but the external anal sphincter is under voluntary, conscious control, allowing voluntary deferral of bowel movements until it's socially appropriate. This is similar to the micturition reflex we discussed in the urinary episodes. Let's dig a little deeper into the defecation reflex, which actually consists of 2 reflexes, the intrinsic and parasympathetic defecation reflexes. The intrinsic reflex is a short reflex that only utilizes the myenteric plexus of neurons along the smooth muscles of the descending colon, sigmoid colon, and rectum. The desired action on the effectors are stimulation of the smooth muscle, propelling feces into the rectum, and inhibition of the internal anal sphincter, allowing the feces to enter the anal canal. The intrinsic reflex alone isn't enough to get the job done, so it requires a collaboration of the parasympathetic defecation reflex, which is a spinal reflex and has the same stimulus and actions, but stronger. When these involuntary reflexes engage, pressure is felt in the rectum and anal canal. Since the external anal sphincter consists of voluntary muscle, we have conscious control of when we intentionally relax it to allow the feces to be expelled when it's appropriate. Another skeletal muscle, called the puborectus muscle, wraps around the rectum, pulling it into an angle that makes it difficult for feces to pass. This muscle is also voluntarily relaxed when it's time to go. Obviously, infants do not possess the voluntary control quite yet, and spinal cord injuries and other clinical conditions may impede voluntary control of defecation. Okay, we're going to wrap up the digestive system talking about its blood supply. Its blood supply is intricate and extensive. So I'm going to discuss it. It's going to be difficult to follow along if you don't have an illustration showing you this blood supply. So I will post some to Instagram to help you follow along. So if we start with the esophagus, we'll see that there are branches coming off the thoracic aorta to the right that are going directly to the esophagus called the esophageal arteries. That's pretty simple. Then the thoracic aorta goes through the diaphragm and becomes the abdominal aorta. Once it's the abdominal aorta, it's going to have several branches coming off of it. There will be 3 branches that are unilateral and anterior, meaning they're not paired. From superior to inferior, they are the celiac trunk, the superior mesenteric artery, and the inferior mesenteric artery. Let's start with the celiac trunk. The celiac trunk itself has 3 branches of its own. Those branches are the common hepatic artery, which goes off to the right toward the liver and gallbladder, the left gastric artery, which goes off to the left to supply the stomach, and the splenic artery. The splenic artery goes all the way to the spleen on the left side inside your ribs, but on its way, it gives off several branches inferiorly called pancreatic arteries that supply the pancreas. Now, if we go back to that common hepatic artery, that artery is going to have several branches of its own. The gastroduodenal branch, that's an artery that supplies the stomach and the duodenum. The right gastric artery, which will meet up with the left gastric artery along the lesser curvature of the stomach to supply the stomach. And the hepatic artery proper, which will branch off into multiple hepatic arteries that go off and supply the liver, as well as the cystic artery that goes off to supply the gallbladder. Now, that gastroduodenal artery is going to go inferiorly and then start looping up around the greater curvature of the stomach. At that point, it's going to turn into the right gastroomental artery, which is going to supply the stomach and the greater omentum, and will meet up with a branch of the splenic artery called the left gastroomental artery. Now, when these arteries meet up, they anastomose, arteries coming together, and the pressure in them allows for a force of blood to enter the branches coming off of those arteries. All right, so now if we go down to the superior mesenteric artery, we're going to see that that is going to have several branches of it coming off to the right that are going to go to the colon and the last part of the small intestine. From superior to inferior, they are the middle colic artery supplying the transverse colon and the upper part of the ascending colon, the right colic artery supplying most of the ascending colon, and the ileocolic artery, which is going to branch out to supply the lower ascending colon, the cecum, the appendix, and the ileum. On the left side of the inferior mesenteric artery, we're going to see ileocolic arteries, we're going to see jejunal arteries. These arteries are going to make these anastomotic loops. They're going to loop around and meet up with each other, and then branches of those loops will form their own loops, and then straight arteries will run off of them right to the jejunum. These loops are called anastomotic loops, and what they do is they allow us to join forces of all these arteries and create this system that forces the pressure into those straight arteries that are going right to the tissue they supply. And then we have the inferior mesenteric artery. The inferior mesenteric artery has branches off to the left. We have the left colic artery, which goes up and supplies the distal transverse colon and a big chunk of the descending colon. And then we have the sigmoid arteries, which will form their own anastomotic loops on their way to supplying the sigmoid colon. And then we have the superior rectal artery, which, as you can imagine, is coming down to supply the rectum. Now, the interesting thing about the venous return of the digestive tract is that, as I've mentioned before, it doesn't all go right back into the inferior vena cava so that we can put it into general circulation. We need to process all of the nutrients that are coming from your digestive tract by the liver. So most of the arteries have a matching vein. There's an inferior mesenteric vein. There's a superior mesenteric vein. Those veins are collecting the blood that is returning from our digestive tract and sending them to a vessel called the hepatic portal vein. The hepatic portal vein will then head to the liver. When it gets to the liver, it's going to bring all of its blood eventually to the sinusoids, and then you can go back and listen to the last episode where I talked about how the liver processes the blood. And then, when the sinusoids, when the hepatocytes, when the hepatic triads, when all those things are done, that blood is going to eventually make its way back into what's called the hepatic veins, and that will drain into the inferior vena cava, and that can head back up to the heart. So that's kind of the blood supply in a nutshell of the digestive tract. And now we're done with the digestive system. So that was a few episodes to cover the entire digestive system, but hopefully it helps you get your B or better in A&P, or just helps you understand the human body a little better. Thanks again to my guests from McGraw-Hill's SHARPEN, and to you, the listener. Good luck, and I'll talk to you next time. Anatomy and Physiology Bit by Bit is a production of Minus 55 Media. Don't forget to check out my Instagram account and my YouTube channel, both called Student Help for AP. I'm posting a lot of stuff on there right now that you can watch and that will hopefully really help you understand this A&P stuff. Very special thank you out to my family, Bucks County Community College, and McGraw-Hill Education, where you can find my tutor video-based textbook alternative Anatomy and Physiology digital suite, already being used by several colleges and universities throughout the United States.